5 years ago, it's almost universal that we trusted doctors. And of all the horrible nightmares that occurred during the COVID outbreak, the one thing that happened is I think people are discerning. I think people are realizing, wow, and watching some of these guys on TV,
Right.
I think one only needs to look, and I'm a capitalist. You know, I like money, I like business.
Yeah.
But when one company, Pfizer, makes $100 million
A little shady.
in a year, and then the bigger question is, there was a drug called a Z-Pak, which doctors put COVID patients on. No, they all learned in medical training that antibiotics don't treat a viral infection.
Yeah, that was a really confusing thing, right?
Pfizer owns Z-Paks.
Yeah.
I mean, you begin to look at the bigger picture, and I think, and it wasn't just me, people began to question Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, some of the information we were getting over TV, to the point now, Mark, and I'm so glad you brought that up when we were in the green room there, to the point where we're really questioning things now.
I think the silver lining with that whole thing is that we are questioning. We are asking an adult in the room, and we can assess and say,
Well, a lot of the problem too, and like I think about this a lot too, is the argument is always trust the experts, right? It's always like Fauci's an expert, trust the experts. But the problem with that argument is that there's so many other experts that are telling you something against what it doesn't need to be Fauci, but against what this other expert says, right? And so why are we not giving them the same amount of trust and giving them the same amount of attention that we are these other guys? And so those are, I think that's just where it becomes so much harder to know. The COVID thing's a perfect example. It just got so confusing to know, hey, who's telling me the truth here? Is it this billion-dollar company that's making a pill that I have to take in order to get over this thing?
Right.
It doesn't look like the results are that great. Or is it this other group who's kind of talking against that? And especially with medicine right now, it's so complicated to know if what you're being sold is real.
well, look at this.
Pfizer. What does this say? So is Zithromax made $1 billion in sales for Pfizer
in 2022?
2002. Imagine 2020.
In 2002. So 2002,
imagine what that is right now?
$1 billion in sales for that year. What was 2022?
Yeah. It's got to be somehow it works. Okay. It's
How could you imagine what it's got to be? $100 billion. All-time high.
Billion.
Go Pfizer, man.
Pfizer reports record
money.
full year 2022 results and provides full year 2023 financial guidance.
Every physician learned this in medical. Everyone. 100% of them.
Yeah.
You don't give a common cold. You don't give a patient an antibiotic. Now, sometimes their viral infection can manifest in a way that it begins a bacterial infection. I understand that. But the millions that were passed out, I shouted fraud in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
Why are they giving?
You shouted fraud way before 2019.
I had it. On my 70th birthday, I got COVID way back.
Yeah.
And today I feel, 100%.
Yeah.
We didn't know what COVID was back then. I got really sick. It was
I remember
my birthday.
that.
We were in Austin trying to have fun, and man, I got really sick. And a week later, I was really well.
Right.
Gee, I must have got the flu. I haven't had the flu in 40 years. I wonder what happened. But that was COVID. And the good thing, the really good thing, is now people are questioning.
Yeah.
People have children who now we're seeing, I'm neutral on this, we're seeing 60 vaccinations by the time a child is 18 years old.
Is that what it is? Is it 60?
What was it originally? Let's say 30 years ago when we were kids.
Okay, so let me just tell you what it was, 100 years ago when I was a kid. And by the way, Mark and I, my brother and I laughed. We're never going to have polio. They had...
Doesn't stand a chance.
Mid-'80s, there was one shot.
Because 3 of these vaccines were combined into a single shot. Children received 5 shots by the time they were 2 years old and not more than 1 shot at a single visit. By the mid-1980s, 7 vaccines were available. Yeah.
And and so you go 30 years.
And now it's 60 by the time they're what?
Let's see if he can pull that up. By the time they're 18.
So 60 by the time they're 82.
And there's probably more now because I think they're recommending a booster for COVID.
They are. The COVID thing is definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so it just makes me, guys, there's two ways to build immunity, passive or active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Remember how they changed the definition of immunity during COVID?
Yes.
This was funny.
Wow.
Did you know about that?
Dude, I had to tune it out eventually.
Yeah, no, I know.
Can we pull that up?
There was,
what
Brett,
was it, bro?
See if you can find this. There was what I want to say it was Oxford, but that might not be right. But there was a definition of immunity that was when you were exposed to something, your body naturally builds its own defense against it. Right? They changed the definition of it. Let's see if you can find it. It's probably only going to be on some like fringe website, unfortunately.
Interesting.
so we go to X. I love it. But yeah, they had changed it to something that reflected the need for a certain vaccine or the need for exposure via vaccine in order to build immunity. So I think it was herd immunity, Brett. I think that was the thing.
Herd immunity. So just how it works, active immunity is what I had after I had COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet your age group, was deeply concerned when you heard that word mandate.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I already have immunity. And by the way, active immunity is more powerful than passive immunity.
Yep.
Okay.
Which means taking a shot.
Yeah.
But I've already had it. Why do we mandate it in the military when why do we mandate it for kids when COVID isn't? And we began, Mark, and look, I'm just, putting this information out there. We began to question doctors. Mm-hmm. I think for the first time for many of us, I had, since I was 20 years old.
Yeah, right.
But I was in that field. And by the way, you guys, I worked in the operating room in the field. You never saw. Did you ever watch MASH?
A little bit, yeah.
So that's what it was like. Quonset huts, Jeeps, bringing people in, helicopters. You never saw doctors break and cry when someone was so mortally wounded we couldn't fix them.
Yeah.
And that's the doctoring that I remember, from way back.
Yeah.
I think doctors are really good people. I always say this on my show, twice my IQ. But if they don't get clinical nutrition, and if they don't get clinical mycology, then you're lost.
Well, and you even take it a step further and say, I mean, most of this continual medical education, CME, is provided by companies like Pfizer, right? Isn't that the thing?
Sure is. Yeah.
So right there, there's it doesn't seem exactly.
It's blatant conflict, and yet we peasants don't see that.
Yeah.
A doctor... A doctor goes, don't get me started, a doctor goes to these meetings covered by the pharmaceutical industry.
100%.
So what would he learn?
100%.
How to eat better so his patients don't need him?
Never.
How to exercise or a far infrared sauna?
Yeah.
Nah.
I mean, talking about the cause, right? That is the cause of a lot of the problems of this.